Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rockets' red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say, does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
Please be seated.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome AEI President Robert Doar.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Robert Doar, President of AEI. And on behalf of our chairman, Dan Daniello, and the entire AEI community, I welcome you to our annual dinner. We're so glad you could join us this evening when we have the privilege of celebrating two great Americans, Irving Kristol and Ambassador Nikki Haley. Now, I have to say, I begin tonight remembering the best Mass I ever attended. It was the one where Monsignor Divini of St. Charles Borromeo on Sydney Place in Brooklyn said, "I'm going to keep this homily short today because there's a game on TV I want to see." And those of you who have been with us before know that it has been our practice in the past, at this point in the program, to invite Bill Kristol up to say a few words about Irving Kristol, the Irving Kristol Award, and to extend greetings from his mother, Bea Hemmelfarb, and their family. But Bea and Bill could not be here tonight, though they still send warm greetings and good wishes to all of us and to Ambassador Haley. And I know we send the same to them. Speaking of Bill reminds me of the story all newcomers to AEI are told early in their tenure. It's kind of a rite of passage, and it's an important story, one we hold close in our hearts, and it goes like this. In all the years, there was only one time when Irving Kristol and Bill Kristol appeared together on a panel at AEI. Father and son were seated on the stage with a moderator between them, and the moderator lobbed questions to each of them, one to Irving and one to Bill, about their respective careers and views on our country. And all was going fine until, as the final question, the moderator asked Bill, "What was the best advice you ever got?" And Bill was stumped. He didn't know what to say. So much advice, which bit of knowledge to pick. What was the best advice? And then Irving leaned into his microphone and said, "Honor thy father." So during my first few months as president of AEI, Irving's words about people in my position has provided a kind of comfort. A think tank president, said Irving, is someone who speaks with authority about subjects in which he has no particular competence. Now, thankfully at AEI, I am surrounded by scholars who have exceptional competence when it comes to confronting our nation's greatest challenges. And many of them are here tonight. And I want to start by recognizing and thanking AEI scholars who are the heart and soul of our institution. Many of these scholars have decades of experience on the front lines of public policy, shaping it, implementing it, seeing how good public policy can lift people up and how bad policy can tear them down. And of course, Irving Kristol had a very different kind of frontline experience. He described his time in the Army during World War II as deeply formative. When he joined, he was a socialist. His regiment was full of tough guys from the south side of Chicago, and by the end of his time with these competitive, less than angelic individualists, he was pretty sure socialism would never work in America. That wouldn't be the last time Irving was mugged by reality. In the half-century that followed, Irving went on to become one of the greatest scholars of his generation. He shaped public debate and defined the core values that we still fight for every day, writing about everything from welfare and religion to Joseph McCarthy and the sexual revolution. He never lost his dedication to his country and its promise. His political principles live on in AEI's work, including economic freedom, American global leadership, and equality of opportunity. Equality of opportunity, not equality of outcome. This idea was crystallized for me when I first read Irving's essay, What is a Neoconservative? And he brought the point home for me at an AEI gathering some years later when he said he especially did not like equality in sports. Now, as a great sports fan myself, I love that reference to sports. And for those Nationals fans here tonight, it must have some significance. What would having your team play in the World Series mean if all outcomes were equal? Why would anyone strive to do great things without a chance for great success? And why should we deny the fruits of success to people who have earned them? One of my Brooklyn school teachers once described to me the joy he felt on the night in 1938 when Max Schmeling, the German boxer who had been a favorite of Hitler and a darling of the Nazi Party, came to New York to fight Joe Louis. Louis, the heavyweight from Alabama, known as the Brown Bomber, knocked him out in less than 3 minutes. Given a chance for a fair fight, Louis proved himself. Now there's an example of equal opportunity leading to great unequal results. Irving also had a deep understanding of the connection between politics and the human good. He hoped that one day we would be able to bring our public and private lives back together into what he called a congenial relationship, where our politics supported family, religion, and community life. A great admiration for Irving's legacy on this front is one reason why we've created the new Social, Cultural, and Constitutional Studies division at AEI. I am confident that Irving, who loved America so deeply, would be proud of our efforts to invigorate this component of AEI's work. It's also why we brought the great policy journal, National Affairs, which I know will continue to be the intellectual heir to Irving's public interest. And Irving's lessons in foreign policy also inform us today. While Pete Seeger was singing about flowers, Irving was asking, where have all the gunboats gone? He was never afraid to promote his own pragmatic sense of world affairs, including a firm commitment to American allies and a dedication to American global leadership. That's why he often lamented what he called the ironies of neo-isolationism and the mistakes of those who would see America withdraw from the world stage. In Irving's mind, America's role in the world required a careful balancing of prudence and restraint, with a willingness to act, even unilaterally, when necessary. And he thought these concerns about America's spirit and America's role in the world were connected. If the United States is to gain the respect of world opinion, Irving wrote in 1975, it first has to demonstrate that it respects itself, its own institutions, its own way of life, the political and social philosophy that is the basis of its institutions and its way of life. To persuade the world, we have to show the world that we love our country. That line of thinking helps us see why our honoree tonight, Ambassador Nikki Haley, is an ideal person to receive the Irving Kristol Award. During her time at the United Nations, Ambassador Haley embodied this idea that a constructive role for America in the world begins with self-respect. She is unafraid to stand up for American ideals and American interests, and she knows how closely connected the two always are. It was so refreshing and reassuring to hear her press this point at the UN, and I trust she will continue to be a powerful advocate for what is best about our country in the years to come. And like Irving Kristol, Ambassador Haley has always been a staunch defender of religious freedom and the role of faith at home and abroad. One of America's greatest graces is its welcoming of religious minorities and appreciation for the role of faith in an individual's life. And Ambassador Haley's own history proves that. Her parents immigrated to America from Amritsar, India. They were teachers, her father at an historically black college, and her mother in the local public schools. In their new home in Bamberg, South Carolina, the Haley family thrived. Their and her success proves that diverse practices and perspectives only enrich American public life. Regardless of whether you're Christian, Sikh, Jewish, or Muslim, a person of any faith or of none, American life is open to you. If you live by our laws, contribute to our society, and bring the best of your traditions to the work of building our country, you will be an American. Ambassador Haley's story affirms that American ethos. To follow her career is to see the great example she has set at home and around the world. She has been an eloquent and powerful advocate for America on the world stage as ambassador to the United Nations, an impassioned defender of limited government as governor of South Carolina, and a powerful voice of moral clarity in our national political climate. Whether it's vulnerable people in her home state or persecuted dissidents in China or Russia, Nikki Haley has provided a sympathetic ear and a strong voice. And if Irving could be here tonight, he might offer one final reminder for all of us. He wrote that America is unique among nations in being founded not on race, not on kinship, not on language, not on religion, but on political values. The essence of being an American is not your party, class, or creed, not your race or your religion, but rather your willingness to share in a common set of principles. Ambassador Haley, a daughter of South Carolina, is the perfect exemplar. Irving would be proud of anyone in public life who has set such an example of courage, decency, and patriotism. Our Irving Kristol Award is given annually to recognize an individual's intellectual and practical contributions to government policy, social welfare, or political understanding. But it's all too rare to find someone like Nikki Haley who's done so much in all three fields. So please join me in applauding Ambassador Haley as we honor her tonight.
Thank you. Thank you so much. That's so nice. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you, Robert. Congratulations on taking leadership of this amazing institution. I want to thank you, your predecessor, Arthur Brooks, and the entire AEI family for honoring me with this award. It's humbling to stand at this podium tonight. This is the same dinner where Alan Greenspan warned of irrational exuberance. This is the same dinner where Charles Krauthammer described an American foreign policy for a unipolar world. And of course, it's the dinner where AEI interns eat for free. That's so great. And I really want to thank all of you for showing up tonight. AEI had the wisdom to schedule this dinner on the same night as Game 6 of the World Series. They really wanted to test how many of you were dedicated to public policy. I will forgive those of you who decide to check your phones for the score, like my husband over here. It's a tremendous honor to receive an award named for the great Irving Kristol, who did so much to strengthen the intellectual foundations that led to American victory in the Cold War and freedom for hundreds of millions of people. For most of the past 15 years, I have lived and worked where AEI's ideas are tested in practice. In South Carolina, we led the way on opening markets, reducing regulations, reforming education, and moving people from welfare to work. For those of us engaged in conservative public policy, AEI is a trusted source. You don't have to agree with all of its ideas, but you can be sure they are all deeply rooted in America's values. You can have confidence they exist to preserve what President Lincoln called the last best hope of Earth. I want to start by saying I am optimistic about America's future. I know that for those who spend too much time on Twitter, it may at times look like it's all over for the American experiment. Depending on which cable network you prefer, there is a sense that things are coming off the rails in America today. We have our problems. There's no denying that. But America has survived a revolution, a foreign invasion, a civil war, a Great Depression, the largest war in world history, and social unrest of a dozen different stripes. And we've come out stronger after every test. We are a truly exceptional nation. One reason things may seem dark, especially on social media and cable news, is that we have lots of people who are attempting to reject the very things that set America apart. This is a real problem, and it's one we should strongly resist. Our history is being attacked as a lie. Influential voices on the left claim America was founded not in freedom, but in oppression. The idea that we must be in control of our borders is dismissed as uncaring bigotry. Some are attempting to redefine American citizenship itself. Ronald Reagan once asked Americans to choose between being citizens or subjects. It was the 60s. Government and liberalism were on the march. The question fit the times. Today, we face a different choice. It is a choice between citizenship and victimhood. Our politics is becoming a contest over who's got the biggest grievance, who's getting the short end of the stick, who's being taken advantage of by a rigged system. Back then, Reagan pointed to big government as the enemy, and he was right. Today, Americans increasingly see each other as the enemy, and that's not right. Too many regard those who disagree with them not simply as wrong, but as evil. But it's hard to have government by the people and for the people if we regard each other as unworthy of even having a conversation with. You see this a lot on college campuses, but you even see it at restaurants these days. I can't believe I'm saying this, but sometimes it even makes me miss what passes for moral clarity at the United Nations. My distinguished predecessor and an AEI alumna, Jean Kirkpatrick, said her experience at the UN left her, quote, in every way a sadder and wiser woman about the world, unquote. While I rarely disagree with Ambassador Kirkpatrick, we do partially differ on this. My time at the UN certainly made me wiser about the world and sadder about parts of it. But it also made me more grateful about our country. At the UN, I worked alongside the ambassadors of dictators and strongmen. I traveled to places most Americans will never go. and I saw things most Americans will never see. What I saw cut through the loud and polarizing voices in our country. I saw what sets America apart, what we must protect and preserve. When you've heard a South Sudanese refugee woman tell you about watching soldiers throw her baby into a fire, when you've seen Venezuelan families walk for hours in the blazing sun to receive the one meal they might have that day, when you've negotiated with representatives of a Chinese regime that is building a surveillance state that would horrify Orwell, when you've seen and done these things, you see just how profound the gifts are that we have received as Americans. And they're not just for Americans. When the cameras were off at the UN, ambassadors from all parts of the world made it clear to me that they envy our ability to live and speak freely. They admire our principles, and they depend on us to lead the world in accordance with our values. At times, this is a much harder case to make among Americans than among nations. We are too caught up in our differences, whether socioeconomic, racial, or religious. These differences increasingly define our politics. To a certain extent, they should. We are very different people, and there are important differences between the political parties. We shouldn't gloss over those differences. We should debate them vigorously. But when we retreat into identity and grievance politics, we make the choice for victimhood over citizenship. By constantly blaming others, we reject personal responsibility for ourselves, our families, and our communities. The choice of victimhood takes us further away from our exceptionalism. But we can still be optimistic about our future as an exceptional nation, and here's why. 93 years ago, on the 150th anniversary of the signing of the Declaration of Independence, President Calvin Coolidge said, quote, "Amid all the clash of conflicting interests, amid all the welter of partisan politics, every American can turn for solace and consolation to the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution of the United States." That statement is just as fitting today. Equality before the law, freedom, inalienable rights. These are not abstractions. They are our inheritance as human beings. The Declaration of Independence outlined them. The Constitution established them as a system of government. It is these sacred principles that make me optimistic. They anchor our nation, and they show us the way forward. For instance, our immigration system is truly broken. It is no longer controlled by the rule of law. It doesn't acknowledge, much less emphasize, the values that make us Americans. The American people are justifiably concerned by both the security of our borders and by America's place as a home for those with the dream and drive to breathe free. People from all over the world are drawn to the United States by our exceptionalism, our freedom, our opportunity, and our belief in human dignity. My parents were among them. They came from India to rural South Carolina in the 1960s. My mother wore a sari. My father wore a turban. He still does to this day. We were different. We stood out. And my family felt the pain of being judged by our difference. Many Americans have felt this pain. Many have felt much worse. But my parents refused to let it define them. They chose citizenship over victimhood. They came to the United States legally. They respected the right of the American people to protect their sovereignty, to be the ones who decide who can join us. And in return, America welcomed them. Immigration is a source of American strength when it is conducted in accordance with our principles. but it must be a two-way street. We welcome immigrants who come to America in accordance with the rule of law, and we must call upon those immigrants to embrace our values and respect our laws in order to become Americans. American leadership in the world is also challenged by some today. To remain strong, they say, America must give up its advocacy of freedom and human dignity abroad. This represents a failure of memory. A world without United States leadership does not mean a world in which our values and interests peacefully coexist with other countries. If it meant countries could live peacefully pursuing their interests, there would be more to recommend the United States retreating from the world. Instead, it means a world with Chinese values devoted to Chinese interests. It means a world with Russian values devoted to Russian interests. It means a world in which radical Islam runs rampant. That is a dark place for American values and a dangerous place for American security. It would be nicer and cheaper if American leadership was not needed to protect our values and our interests. Sadly, that's not the world we live in. If you don't believe me, I invite you to spend a day in the United Nations Security Council. Some of its most powerful members not only don't share American values, they actively work to defeat them. We faced a choice. Either sacrifice our values in an attempt to win friends at the UN, or defend our values and fight some fights virtually alone. Freedom and human dignity aren't just the right values to promote. They are our most powerful foreign policy tools, which is why we fought for them. We called out Russia for its violations of Ukraine's sovereignty. We sanctioned the North Korean regime for representing a unique evil in the world, a dictatorship that is starving its own people to finance the creation of nuclear weapons. And on Israel, after a heartbreaking betrayal by the previous administration, we once again embraced our friend and ally. At the UN, Israel is the clearest example of this worldwide clash of values. The only fully democratic country in the Middle East is routinely demonized as an oppressor. The only country in the region that represents religious freedom, gender equality, and gay rights is singled out for abuse in the tragically misnamed UN Human Rights Council. If America does not lead the way in stopping this nonsense, no one else will. Here at home, the presidential election season is upon us. With that comes the inevitable running to the partisan barricades, and that's okay. Electing a president is serious business. The two sides have very different visions for our country. We deserve a spirited campaign to debate those differences. But here again, respect for the Constitution should guide us. President Trump is a disruptor. That makes some people very happy, and it makes some people very mad. But if we are a country that lives by the rule of law, we must all accept that we have one president at a time, and that president attained his office by the choice of the American people. When I was in the administration, I served alongside colleagues who believed that the best thing to do for America was to undermine and obstruct the president. Some wrote about it anonymously in the New York Times. Others just did it. They sincerely believed they were doing the right thing. I sincerely believed they weren't. The president was the choice of the people, in accordance with our founding charter. No policy disagreement with him, no matter how heartfelt, justifies undermining the lawful authority that is vested in his office by the Constitution. For those who don't like the president, they are free to protest him, and many do. But if you serve in the administration, you are not free to push your personal agenda. What's at stake is not President Trump's policies. What's at stake is the Constitution. We are a nation with a history, borders, and common language. We are also the first nation devoted to a higher good. Our beliefs are what make us Americans. Our Constitution is what allows this great experiment in democracy to survive and thrive. AEI gets this. You are working to restore respect for the Constitution in American life. Congratulations on your new research division for social, cultural, and constitutional studies. Another reason I'm optimistic is because I've been spending time with high school and college students. Most often, they face hostility on their campuses because of their conservative views. But they are undaunted. They want to be leaders, specifically American leaders. They appreciate the things that make America exceptional. The more time I spend with these young people, the more confident I am about our future. These young Americans are not complacent, far from it. They understand that our ability to speak freely, to debate, to worship and determine our own destinies, these are things to be grateful for and preserve. It was 1862 when Abraham Lincoln called America the last best hope of earth. Our country was more deeply divided than ever before or since. It was a time of war for the country and a time of political peril for Lincoln. Still, he showed confidence in America's future. In his message, Lincoln asked repeatedly, "Can we do better?" He answers his own question by reminding his countrymen and women of America's higher purpose and greater gifts, our exceptionalism. I can't match the wisdom and eloquence of Lincoln, but like him, I believe in the American people's ability to find our way through any challenge by honoring the beliefs that define us. There will always be work to do to be a more perfect union, but we will always do better if we acknowledge the truth that the world already knows about us. Even on our worst days, we are blessed to be Americans. Thank you very much. God bless. Thank you.